Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Happy summer every way. First full day of summer for the world. Enjoy it. Well, for the world in the north of the equator. I am so happy to be here. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway, and I love summertime. And this is really the first full summer in 2 years, since most of our summers last year were fractured. And in the United States, at least, it's opening up and with a big bang. It's Prime Day as well. We've never had the intersection of Prime Day and summer, so don't spend all day online, but I know a lot of you will be over there at Amazon picking up your deals, and I know the big screen TVs are the things that draw some of you in, but whatever it is, enjoy your Prime Day, but get out and enjoy summer. Let's look at the rundown. The Delta variant has begun to spread throughout Europe, threatening the progress there and shutting down Great Britain, or pushing it backwards, not shutting it down, pushing it backwards. Delta variant spreads more rapidly than any previous variant. No sign that is deadlier, but it can indeed take out more people more quickly. You got to go get vaccinated in America because it's going to come here too. If you haven't got it, it's likely to come back through with a wave. Getting the unvaccinated. Big story in the New York Times Magazine. Can the CDC be fixed? At length, it talks about, well, yeah, they had to deal with President Trump and all this politicization, but really they're old, slow, indecisive, incapable of making a decision, and those that they made were wrong. They had imperfections in the testing, terrible vagueness in the guidelines. It's an agency that hadn't been tested in years, and it failed its big test. Time for reform. Make it smaller, make it quicker, make it younger. There's a story in the Washington Post how pastors and health experts are struggling to close the vaccine gap among white evangelicals. Provocative headline. But they point out that actually Latino Protestants are the least likely to get vaccinated, that black Protestants have only recently caught up with white evangelicals. So it's really kind of a white evangelical rant disguised as a newspaper story. In the New York Times, it tells us that the primary in New York City, which is tomorrow, is going to be driven by public safety, and then by public safety, and then by public safety. Because the bad old days are back. I lived in New York in 1980. You didn't want to live in New York in 1980. It was a pretty rough place to live. And it's going back to 1980 because of the 8 years of buffoonery. That's the word used in today's Wall Street Journal lead editorial, Saving New York. 8 years of buffoonery by Bill de Blasio. And he is a clown and has been widely represented as a clown. So now the question is, how do you get rid of the clown? Well, you go to a former police officer, Adams. And although his opponents are campaigning together, because they got that screwed up system now, Andrew Yang and Catherine Garcia are urging each of their supporters to vote for the other as number two. Ranked choice voting is really a stupid innovation in America because people overthink it and they don't understand it. It takes forever. But look for Eric Adams in the runoff against either of those, and I expect Eric Adams to win. We will see. But Saving New York, the Wall Street Journal is pleading with the people of New York to avoid the bad old days and the combination of public unions and the gentry taking charge of this city, which leads to what we had in the 70s and the early 80s. There's a lot of silence, though, in the city of New York because of what happened in Brooklyn over the weekend as the Milwaukee Bucks put the Brooklyn Big Three to rest for the summer, following LeBron into obscurity. Now, the bad news comes from abroad. Raisi won in Iran. He's a, quote, hardliner. Now, there are no softliners in Iran. There's only those for whom propaganda outlets in the United States claim to be moderate. The moderates never matter. All that matters is Khamenei, the supreme leader. And now he has a mouthpiece, Raisi, and yet we still deal with him. We still have our gang of appeasers over in Switzerland trying to give them the money to get off of the floor. Iran's system keeps its grip despite the chaos, says the New York Times' Max Fisher. And Iran's new president, Ibrahim Raisi, consolidates hardline grip as reformers are pushed aside. Raisi's win, says Karim Fahim, is not expected to derail negotiations currently underway in Vienna, not Switzerland and Austria, between Tehran and world powers to revive the 2015 nuclear deal. Why? Because it's a fetish. It's a fetish of the Obama-era acolytes who believe they did a Nixon to China thing when it was not Nixon to China. It was sort of Nixon to California. It was not really anything that couldn't be done by anyone, which is give them billions of dollars in the store and let them get a nuclear weapon. Khamenei has allowed Iran to reopen the dialogue, according to Fahim, but all he wants is to get all the goodies and to keep building his nuclear weapon. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon is paramount priority for the United States. Well, then don't do the deal, Jake. Tell Tony Blinken, tell the president no deal. Don't make the same mistake President Obama did and is remembered for, appeasement. The New York Times is very upset that Pope Francis is not very upset with the Catholic bishops who are about to declare that communion is a question that has to be decided bishop by bishop based upon the recipient's positions on the core social teachings of the gospel, especially abortion, suggesting that communion may not be available in some dioceses based upon elected officials' positions on abortion. Not sure how many bishops will do that, but the New York Times is appealing to Pope Francis to get involved, but that's not how the church works. Bishops are actually in charge of their diocese. As we learned Thursday, thank goodness Archbishop Chaput is in charge of Philadelphia and would not cave to the city's bureaucracy and instead sued, and in Fulton versus City of Philadelphia won a huge victory for religious liberty. I have a column at the Washington Post over the weekend on why that represents such a big win. It's 9-0. Some conservatives wanted it to be 6-3 and repeal Smith, which is an old case from 1990, which is a bad case, Justice Scalia's worst decision. I'll talk about it a little bit later on the show. Meanwhile, about Iran, Naftali Bennett, the new prime minister in Israel, says that Raisi's election is a sign for world powers to wake up on Iran. If they're in the deep slumber of President Obama, and he induced it in a lot of places, hard to imagine that they will wake up. The good news is that Yair Lapid, who's the new foreign minister of Israel, is going to visit the United Arab Emirates next week. The trip will mark the first time an Israeli minister has visited a Gulf state in an official capacity. That is great good news. As the Abraham Accords continue to evolve and strengthen the region's anti-Iran coalition, no longer is it hostage to the Hamas radicals funded by the mullahs in Tehran. Peace-loving Arab governments, peace-loving Israeli government going to get together with everyone and make it work. However, that new government in Israel is under stress already this morning as the coalition scrambles for a way to extend the ban on the Palestinian family reunification. It splits the new coalition two different ways, and of course, Likud is pushing it to expose the fractures in that new coalition. Do they get through the first month? We will see. The government appointed 36 diplomats. Netanyahu hadn't appointed any ambassadors for 6 months as election loomed. The Telegraph has a great column by Douglas Murray. Joe Biden is getting a free ride for behavior that would have been seen Donald Trump denounce. You don't have to be a Trump fan to notice that there's been a change of tone in media coverage between his administration and Biden's. Yes, it's gone for sympathetic. Absolutely love President Biden, but that's okay because voters don't. His approval numbers are plummeting. It's a long tradition in Rhode Island. The insufferable Sheldon Whitehouse, insufferably arrogant, pretentious, condescending Sheldon Whitehouse, who was criticized a few years ago for being a member of an all-white beach club in Rhode Island. Turns out he's still a member of the all-white beach club. And he said, well, you know, it's a long tradition in Rhode Island. Well, segregation was a long tradition in the South, too, Sheldon. Every time you look at Sheldon, just think he's a racist. He belongs to a racist club. But any other politician in America, except the sort of most boring, most condescending snuffleupagus in the Senate, Sheldon Whitehouse, belongs to an all-white club. Unbelievable. North Face owner pulled Jianjing criticism, then reinstated it. Wait till you hear what Jonathan Swan did to the president of Pakistan. He's going to be a guest today. Salena, Zito, Jake Sherman, Brett Stevens, John Birch from Alliance Defending Freedom, Peter Baker, Jonathan Swan, Josh Kraushaar. It's Beltway Correspondent Day to catch up on the news as we head into summer. Happy summer, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, and I'll get you through the summer like I have for 21 years. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. 51 minutes after the hour. First day of summer and Prime Day. What a perfect day for Salena Zito, columnist of the world from Yinzerland, the Yinzer Report. Good morning, Salena. Happy summer.
Good morning. Did you have a nice Father's Day?
I did indeed saw the crazy dumb movie with my boys, the Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. Just a silly, absurd slapstick movie and not for kids. Salena, I have never heard of Virginia Hume or Haven Point, but you've got me sold. I was in Maryland over the weekend as well on Saturday until Sunday morning, and so I gather going to the Delaware beaches or the Maryland beaches or Bethany or Rehoboth, you got to take Virginia Hume's Haven Point.
It's a great book. I have always indulged in a good summer read. Even as a young girl, in fact, I used to love to read the Hardy Boys,
Of course.
and 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 so it's one of the things I anticipate as much as I anticipate fishing or hiking or all the things you do on vacation.
So, did
And
you get
so
down to Chestertown, Maryland? Did you go there, or did
I
you just?
I did go. I did go to Chestertown, Maryland.
How long does it take to get from Yinzerland to Chestertown?
Well, see, you know me, I went the back way, which, by the way, was absolutely gorgeous. You would have no idea that you were traveling around Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Maryland, and Philadelphia. I mean, it was very pastoral. There were small towns, the rolling hills, mountains, rivers. It was lakes. It was gorgeous. It took 6 hours.
Oh, I'm telling you, if you get to the Eastern Shore, America, and this is a part of Maryland that very few people get to, it is as rural as Iowa. There is nothing out there except mosquitoes and horseflies. So, Salena, that's the summer read. I also want to turn to your column this morning. Homeschooling parents and others are turning the hand on educational experiences. I don't like the headline. What I like is the fact that in the column you point out 64% of American parents are thinking more favorably of homeschooling. I think there's going to be a mass migration to private schools via scholarships or ACE scholarships or something like that, or to homeschooling. And I think yours is the first column to note this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and by the way, I don't make the headlines. Um,
You're
but
right. I know that. I always apologize for people who don't like my headlines. We do not write the headlines. Yep.
no, no. Um, but it's been really fascinating for me to watch the evolvement of attitudes towards education. People sometimes, and we're all guilty of it. I was guilty of it myself, where you just sort of going along with the beat, and you're not really you're paying attention, but you're getting granular about your child's education. Then a crisis hits. And you have all of a sudden you have this understanding about where the power comes from when it comes from your child's education. And it doesn't come from the things that they're learning. It comes from school boards. It comes from teachers' unions. And it makes you rethink about how your child is learning, what they are learning, and if you should have more control of it. And homeschooling is something that has soared in positive attitudes among parents, and they're rethinking and relooking at how their child is educated. I will
Yes,
tell
Selena,
you this.
I'm trying to describe to people what critical race theory debate is about. And I don't want to get involved in academic jargon. I just tell people it's about how 2 or 3 hours of your child's day will be spent. Will it be spent teaching them conflict, or will it be spent teaching them arithmetic, reading, and writing? Will it be spent on grievances and re-education and the political cant of the day, or are they going to be doing community building, good drills, doing math, doing multiplication tables, doing the kind of stuff that turns them, and maybe even some home economics. Homeschooling is really about, hey, it's about the education you need to survive in America, not critical race theory.
Yeah, absolutely. And the lack of things that our children learn in school is astounding. I can remember my daughter coming home from school, and they were first day on American history, and the teacher started it at and she went to a very good public school, and the teacher started the American Revolution at the Tea Party, and my daughter corrected her and said, well, what about the French and Indian War? I mean, it's that kind of. I mean, you had to have something for Britain to to tax the colonies. It didn't. They were just mad one day and threw tea in the water.
Yeah.
They were mad for a reason.
Good for your daughter. And it's just generally people want dates and places. You got to have a spinal cord of history on which to hang dates, and you don't hide anything like slavery. You don't hide anything like John Calhoun, the embarrassment of the nation. You don't hide the brutality, but you also don't fixate on anything, and you try and teach sweet. But more importantly, how much time do you spend doing anything? And homeschoolers are now doing hands-on education, and it's a great column, Salena. I don't think you can spend too much time on education as a columnist. I think American parents are gobbling it up. Every column of the Salena, including what to read this summer and how to raise your kids or what people are doing in the latter, at SalenaZito.com. Hour number 2 of the first day of summer with Jake Sherman, Brett Stevens, ADF's John Birch. Coming up, America. Stay tuned. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. First day of summer, and welcome to all of you summer people. It's good to have you back. You're in your car, you're driving around. I know you're headed on vacation. Jake Sherman is here to get the week off. He is the editor-in-chief of Punchbowl News. If you go to punchbowlnews.com, you can get his newsletter every morning for free. Good morning, Jake. Happy summer.
Good morning, Hugh. Thank you. Happy summer to you.
Did you watch the U.S. Open yesterday?
I did a little bit. I was doing Father's Day activities. My co-founder, Anna Palmer, got married over the weekend, so I was at her wedding in Virginia, but so I was a little bit in transit.
Best wishes to Anna and her new marriage. I didn't know that, so pass that along. Let's talk a little bit, however, about interviews, because I'm going to bring up Jonathan Swan, which you mentioned in Punchbowl News. But first, do you watch Faraday on the Golf Channel?
A little bit. I have in the past, yep.
He's just an amazing interviewer. He really has the craft down. I wanted to play for people. Cut number 12. He's talking to Bryson DeChambeau about the approach to technical golf. Cut number 12.
Cup or both.
The Ryder Cup was always on my mind, but for the most part, I wanted to win. I knew if I finished top 10 to top 5, it was mine. There's really nothing anybody could do. And unfortunately, I actually hurt my shoulder Thursday. That morning practice session, it actually just gave out. And so I was playing with my left arm the whole round. I got in like 2 or 3 over, something like that. It was tough. That's the other thing, too, is I don't have a very good memory with what I shoot or how I play.
See, that's
no
a
idea.
Huge advantage.
Yeah. Yeah.
All you need for a happy life is good health and a bad memory.
Exactly. You got it.
So Jake, I love that line. All you need for a happy life is a good health and a bad memory. And I think that's true about political journalists like yourself. Because if you're going to write a column every day, you've got to forget what Joe Manchin has said about the filibuster. And that was a long setup to Punchbowl News this morning. You said there's drama about the filibuster. There's no drama about the filibuster, Jake.
Well, there's no drama in that it's not going to get, and we say that in the piece you're referring to, we say that he's not going to blow up the filibuster, and I agree with you on that. That doesn't mean that people won't call for it, and that doesn't mean that it's not going to be a huge headache for Chuck Schumer. Now, I think Chuck Schumer would love to not have drama around it, but he does, and frankly, and it's going to continue to be something that gnaws at Democrats when they can't pass legislation.
You see, the line I laughed at was the drama has been building for weeks, and I think it's almost an addiction of Beltway media, and you are no different from me or everybody else who talks about the filibuster. There's just drama means suspense, means you don't know how it's going to end. There's very little drama if you've seen any kind of thriller movie, if you know how it ends. And so there's no drama. It's just they're not even going to get close to cloture, right? Is there one Republican who's voting for the election bill?
No, absolutely not, which we also say.
Yeah, I know, but it's the lead. The drama has been building. I want to go back, though, to the top. This is a massive week for President Biden's quest for a bipartisan infrastructure deal. Now, that is true. I watched Rob Portman on Meet the Press yesterday, and he's building, Portman said it accurately, you got to build 60 votes from the middle out. And it does look to me like they're going to get there. What do you think a final number on that vote is?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, the White House seems to be quite optimistic, as does Rob Portman, that they'll get some sort of compromise at the end of the day. Listen, a bill, I tend to think when things like this happen, it's not 61 votes that gets it. It's a bill that gets, 80 votes or something like that. But I just think I continue to be skeptical of this approach, not because it's bipartisan, just because it relies on kind of this idea that there will be one package of infrastructure, another package that moves simultaneously with guarantees from Sinema and Manchin that it will pass this a bunch of social safety net enhancements or additions. So I just think it's kind of too cute by half, and that's why I'm skeptical.
Well, I'm skeptical that the reconciliation can get through because Manchin has been saying all along that $2 trillion is too much. So if they expect to spend $1.2 trillion on infrastructure, which is good old-fashioned pork. That's why it's going to pass. It's good old-fashioned pork at much bigger than Obama's bill. It's 25% bigger than President Obama's stimulus act after they did $2 trillion of pork already this year, which they call COVID relief, and we've got inflation brewing. But the reconciliation would actually just make Joe Manchin be where he was originally, supporting another $2 trillion in spending on top of $2 trillion in spending. Am I not right?
No, you're right, but I do. That's the problem here. So Democrats are not going to go for a slim back bipartisan infrastructure bill without guarantees on the other side that they're going to be able to pass the rest of their agenda, which would have to rely on Manchin and Sinema voting yes. So I find it hard to believe. That's the problem here. I find that construct, this bank shot construct, a little bit hard to believe.
Well, I just think they'll go for the pork and then reconciliation will die because nobody wants to raise taxes by killing off stepped-up bases or crippling corporate productivity. I think it will die on other grounds. Jake, let me talk to you about Iran's new hardline president. There is no doubt that this guy is the worst president, but Khamenei runs the country anyway, so it's always been kind of a joke. But it's not slowing down. Doesn't matter who Iran elects. If you've got appeasers at the White House and the State Department, they're going to do the JCPOA resurrection deal, right? It doesn't matter who is in charge of Iran if you want to give them everything.
It does seem to be that they will get them, that they are, let me put it this way. There's no question that the White House is eager for a return to the JCPOA. And I agree with the idea that Khamenei is definitely in charge in Iran. And I think it's been the case for a long time, Hugh, that it doesn't really matter who the president of Iran is.
Yes.
I think we've seen that. Thought it was interesting this morning. The AP had a story out of Tehran that one of the nuclear facilities is going to be shut down for 3 or 4 days, which I thought was very interesting, especially given that there's been disruptions, let's call them, to their nuclear program and to various other parts of their infrastructure in the last couple months.
The regime is reeling. It's on the ropes, and I don't know why, like Obama, Biden's going to throw it a lifeline. I want to close with our friend Jonathan Swan, who's coming up next hour. I played his interview earlier because it's elegant. The setup, the pause, he gives him time to answer. What did you make of Jonathan Swan? More importantly, will the same questions that he asked the Prime Minister of Pakistan be posed to LeBron James, say, or the head of Coca-Cola, or anybody who does business in China? Because Jonathan put the screws to Khan. Is American journalism going to put the screws on genocide to Americans doing business in China?
Good question. I thought Jonathan's interview was masterful. I thought that the setup was masterful, and I agree with you. I mean, I think when athletes have been asked that question before or similar questions, they've regretted being involved in answering it. But that's a very good question. Thankfully, I don't cover basketball, so I don't have a window into LeBron James's mind or the stage to ask him a question.
But everybody has to answer the same question. I mean, all the time. Everybody has to. Genocide is underway. What are you doing about it? At least are you speaking out? And I think ESPN can take a lesson from Faraday. Let me, not from Faraday, but from Jonathan Swan. Let me finish by talking to you about the Liz Cheney piece. I had Liz Cheney on the radio last week. We spent 10 minutes talking about everything except President Trump. And it was a great interview, and she hasn't ruled anything in or anything out for 2024 because it's just too early. From your observation, is she running for re-election for the House in Wyoming?
She says she is, and I don't get the sense that she's going to quit. I don't get that sense out of her that she's that kind of a person. She has said to me a million times she's going to run again, and her staff has said that as well. By the way, right now there's a number of candidates that are going to try to defeat her, and if there are a number of candidates that are going to try to defeat her, she's going to win. I would imagine, because the anti-Liz field would splinter. So I do think she's going to run again. And as we said this morning, also she continues to get just a tremendous amount of attention for somebody who is in her position.
Yeah, the Cheney brand is so strong in Wyoming, and I have to declare, I work for Mrs. Cheney. The vice president is a friend. I've interviewed Mary, and Liz has been on 100 times. I don't think she's going to, but I was just wondering if she was going to run for president, does it make sense to run for the House? Because the presidential campaign's a 3-year deal.
Yeah, I don't know that she has the modern day Republican Party, as we've seen, is very interested in Liz Cheney's type of politics. Although I will say, I do think she's going to run for re-election. I don't think she's going to want to leave the House. By the way, she could have walked into a Senate seat. I mean,
yeah,
she could have been a senator for life.
The Cheney brand in Wyoming, I think people are just being very short-sighted if they think Matt Gaetz can go to Wyoming and dent the Cheney brand. It's just silly. Jake Sherman, Punchbowl News. Thank you, Jake. Next Monday, we'll see that both the filibuster and the voting bill went down, but we'll talk about it in a week. Jake Sherman joins me every Monday with Punchbowl News. You should be subscribed, punchbowlnews.com. Stay tuned, America. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Happy first day of summer. Happy Prime Day. Happy everything. I'm joined by Peter Baker of the New York Times. Good summer to you, Peter.
Hey, good summer to you.
You can't be having much of a vacation if you've got a book coming out. I read Axios this morning. I did not know that you and Susan were working on a book on Trump, so I want to talk about that. But are you in? What's the pub date for the Baker Glasser book?
We've got a little time. I think there's a rush coming out this summer. A number of our colleagues and competitors have books coming out in the next few weeks. We're not working that fast. We're taking the year, and we'll come out sometime next year when we have a little more time to digest it and do some more research.
Let me salute your smarts. When you've got 17 different books coming out based on 22 interviews with the former president, there will be a story in the books themselves, right? Between what he says to A and what he says to B and what is covered and what isn't covered. And that will itself be part of your narrative, I assume.
Yeah, look, what we found over the time is that if you do it too quickly, you're going to miss out on some things. There's value in doing it quickly, and I'm sure these books will be great. Our book, we hope, will be a little bit more, lasting. We hope that it will profit from whatever reporting is in these books. I mean, it'll profit from some of the memoirs, I think, that probably come out between now and the time that we're done. So we'll have a fuller range of information and history to work with, I think.
Now, I'm not going to ask you to slag on anybody, but if you lined up the 16 other books that will be coming out, and yours might be the last, I think I know which one will be most valuable. Which one do you think will be most valuable to you?
That's an excellent question. I'm not going to do that because I'm friends with many of these other authors.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
I have great respect for all of them, and I'm some of them will be more valuable than others, obviously. But I think that each book has its own different type of value, right? I mean, some books are better written, some books are better analysis, some books have more sensational reporting. Each of them adds something, I think, to our knowledge, at least if they're done well.
I think Jared Kushner's is the one that will have the most detail that no one else has access to. Now, it might have the most curve on it, too. If you put spin on the ball, Jared's going to put spin on the ball better than anyone else on the inside. I know Kellyanne Conway's doing one, but Mike Pompeo and O'Brien aren't, and so they're the other three. Mark Meadows wasn't there long enough. Mick Mulvaney got exiled. General Kelly isn't writing. So I think it'll be Kushner's book. From there, from the campaign all the way through the departure, and I think every incentive to be as candid as possible. Do you agree with that take?
Well, he obviously has a vantage point nobody else has, right? There from the beginning through the end, obviously a member of a family, involved in so many big, important issues. My understanding, you may have a more recent understanding, my understanding as of a couple of months ago was it was focused mainly on the Middle East, which I think is obviously an interesting aspect of what happened. And I don't know how much he's going to expand beyond that and talk about a lot of the other things that happened. I hope he does in some ways, because I think it would be interesting to hear what he has to say.
I think he's going to do justice reform at a minimum because he is the First Step Act guy, and he worked around the clock to get that passed. And just a unique, they have a long life ahead of them. They have to write a book that will endure and not be either dismissed or over-reliant. And it's a tough rope to walk given the Trump diehards and the Trump critics, and Jared's right in the middle there. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'll also read you, Peter, and Susan's book because you guys have a record here, like the James Baker book, which I hope continues to sell for people's summer read. Have you seen that? Some people buy one book for this summer. Baker, Master, what was the title? The title I haven't got it in front of me.
The Man Who Ran Washington, Life and Times of James Baker. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone who knew Baker has loved that book, Peter. So I hope you get a summer bump. Is it coming out in paper?
Yeah, it'll come out in paper in September, and hopefully we'll get another ride at that point. Yeah, we enjoyed doing that book because Baker obviously represented a whole generation of politics. And so in his story, you could tell the story of America through basically a whole generation. This will be a different kind of book, obviously, but this one's important too.
I spoke on behalf of the Heritage Foundation to the Republican Study Committee on Thursday night, and they got a lot of questions about the Reagan years because I was a kid running around the Reagan years, and people are still fascinated by it. It's a completely different time, not without its own controversies, its own partisan press, its own debates internally, but people look back at that now through rose-colored glasses and say, was it as easy as it seems? And your book on Baker makes it very clear it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. I mean, it's definitely a different era, and we should learn from its successes and failures, but definitely, obviously, as you say, there were obviously very cutthroat politics. It was obviously a rough time. There's a lot of partisanship. There's a lot of contention. There was, though, I think, a difference in Washington at that time because you could, at least if you were a Baker or, and with Reagan's, support and leadership, still cut deals. You could still find ways to work with the other party at times. Not always. They can have fights. That's what politics is meant to be about. But it wasn't always about the campaign. It wasn't always about the fight. It was from time to time doing big things. Baker, with the cooperation of Democrats, reformed Social Security. He rewrote the tax code. He helped end the Contra Wars. So he was able to find ways of working across the aisle when Reagan never had a Republican House the entire time he was there. Neither did Bush 41. So they had no choice but to work across the aisle if they wanted to get things done. And getting things done was important to Baker. That's why I think we remember him.
Now, the Iran-Contra is the obvious outlier from that, and I remember well, Dick Cheney is the ranking Republican on Iran-Contra. His chief counsel, Dick Leon, recently taking senior status as a district court judge in D.C. It was brass-knuckled. People have to remember that, but nevertheless, a different era. Peter, I want to ask you about Jonathan Swan's interview last night with the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Did you see the clip?
I didn't see the clip. I understand it's gotten quite a lot of traction. I'm looking forward to seeing it, yeah.
Well, it's a beautiful setup. The first question is, why do you stress Islamophobia? Prime Minister Khan goes on at length about the evils of the West and Islamophobia, and then what about the Uyghurs? And it's abba, dabba, 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 dabba.
Yeah.
It was just beautifully executed. Now, the question becomes, if a genocide is underway, and I believe it is, and as Jonathan said, the evidence is overwhelming, do American corporations doing business in China and American sports figures who benefit from a Chinese audience and American movie stars like Fast and Furious as John Cena have to answer the same questions that the Prime Minister of Pakistan does?
Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, I would say, by the way, Jonathan has become one of our real leading interviewers these days, right? He has become really quite good at that. And every time he does one, it's worth watching. And I think you're right. I mean, the Uyghurs is a huge issue that hasn't gotten nearly enough attention. It has to, I think, color our thinking about China and about what kind of place that is to do business and to do diplomacy with. I mean, that doesn't mean you can't necessarily do business or diplomacy there, but this is such a huge thing that's going on and doesn't get nearly enough attention in the world, both in terms of the American context and in terms of our media. We need to be doing more, if you ask me, and it's tough because China, as you know, has kicked us out, kicked our reporters out,
Yes.
the Wall Street Journal reporters out. Doing this kind of reporting is not easy, and people who have brought it to the world have been some of my colleagues and our competitors who risked everything to try to bring the story to the world. But it's such an important, big story, one of the worst ones in the world today.
Now, going back to my setup here was the Baker book. You know how in the 80s, Berlin was the place you had to go. You had to go to Berlin, you had to go to Israel, you had to go to Italy, and you had to go to Ireland. The three I's plus Berlin is where you had to go if you were running for president. I think every Republican is going to be going to Taiwan now. I believe that Taiwan is the new Berlin Wall. Do you see that developing, Peter, that this is going to be a divide between the parties, China, in the way that the Soviet Union, everyone was against the Soviet Union, but people approached it very differently. Do you think that's going to divide Republicans and Democrats going forward?
That's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that. It's going to be fascinating to watch this next 3 years, particularly among Republicans, to see how they distinguish themselves on China. One thing that we see out of Trump, not a lot of consensus came out of his era, but one consensus that did, I think, between the parties and certainly within the Republican Party, is that China is our major threat or competitor on the world stage today, even more than Russia. And I think that how the two parties position themselves is going to be big in 2024. I think how individual candidates position themselves going in there is going to be big. I hadn't seen the flow to Taiwan yet. If it happens, that would be a real change, because that's not been something we've seen in the past. Remember, of course, when President-elect Trump talked with the leader of Taiwan prior to becoming inaugurated, but after being elected, it caused a huge stink. He said, well, why shouldn't I do it? But then kind of backed off because, of course, China just was so outraged, and he wanted to make a deal with China on trade and stuff. So it's a big moment, I think, in terms of a big paradigm shift in our politics on China. Even Jim Baker, to mention one, has said that our collective theory of the case of China back in his era, it turned out to be wrong, which is that in bringing them into the international system would somehow moderate their domestic repression and their international adventurism. That hasn't been the case. A lot of people on both sides seem to agree on that now.
Last quick question, Peter. I hope you're covering the JCPOA. Jake Sullivan's a smart guy. I hope he's talking to you. But Raisa, his election as president, he's just a hardliner. But there are no moderates in Iran. It's a dictatorial, theocratic, awful, tyrannical, totalitarian regime. Do you think they're going to stick this through? I mean, are they really going to replay JCPOA 1.0 into 2.0?
I don't know where that stands at the moment, honestly. It's a good question. I don't think they could do it on the same terms. They're going to have to figure out a way of addressing some of the issues and flaws that people saw in the original.
Take a look and see if they come up with a single source for uranium, enriched uranium, that will bypass the need for Iran to enrich uranium. That might be the way out, but I don't see it happening. Peter Baker of the New York Times, always good to talk to you. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined by Josh Kraushaar of the National Journal. Hotline Josh on Twitter. Josh, I was just talking with Jonathan Swan about his interview with Prime Minister Khan. And I thought it was airing this coming Sunday. It's already aired. Did you see the clip of that?
I did. It was a master class in interviewing where Jonathan just walked him down his allegations of Islamophobia in the West, and just really hammered him by not speaking out against China's oppression of the Uyghurs. It was a real. Jonathan's one of the best interviewers in the business, and it was great to watch him do that interview with the Pakistani leader.
Yeah, masterclass. It was 3-camera, not 2-camera, which I thought. But we talked about the technique, and now I wonder about the fallout. If Jonathan Swan can ask the Prime Minister of Pakistan about the Uyghurs, so can every reporter in America ask every official, corporate executive, and sports figure who does business in China. Will that happen?
Oh, I think so. I think you saw that on, I think, Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace, talking with the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, about the U.S. policy towards China and how it's going to be tougher and bringing that up. But anyone who cares about human rights has to bring up in any conversation with China the concentration camps in Xinjiang and the oppression of the Uyghurs. It's just a must start question to any discussion with Chinese policy.
But it's also beyond policy and Prime Minister. It's sports figures. It's LeBron, who won't say anything about China. It's John Cena in Fast and Furious, who issues policies in Mandarin. And it's every tech company in the Silicon Valley that is selling stuff to them or trying to get into the market. That has always been, you know how the entertainment journalism business is. It's symbiotic. It's parasitical, actually. Ditto the business journalism. They don't want to ask corporate CEOs about China. They'll ask Major League Baseball about Atlanta and Georgia voting right, but they won't ask about China. I think Swan may be a turning point. You agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I think so. I've actually been reading Josh Rogan's book about the U.S.-China relationship, and I'm in the middle of it right now. But one of the things that struck me about his reporting is that China has really focused on, I guess, what we would call soft power and kind of broadening its influence. They don't actually rely on spies as much as they do, kind of useful idiots, people who will state the Chinese communist propaganda without even realize that they're doing it. And
mentioned John Cena. That was a great example. But even in the NBA and any corporation or any entertainment company that has business in China, which is a lot of folks, they've decided to kowtow to the Chinese, and it's had a lot of really disillusioning implications. So I think the more we recognize what's going on in China, the more we recognize about the human rights abuses, the more that you'll see people wake up to the challenges there.
No, I'm not going to discount their actual out-and-out spying. When you end up on Eric Swalwell's Mistress and Dianne Feinstein's chauffeur, you've got a pretty good covert operation. But the influence operation is now playing the discrimination card. And I, of course, condemn discrimination against Chinese Americans and any violence against Asian Americans. But I want people to know that is now a wolf warrior card on Twitter. And a lot of the Twitter accounts that are vanishing, Twitter's become serious, I think, about bots being run by China. Have you noticed that? Your numbers are going down as they kill off the bots, and that's crucial for Twitter's credibility because China knows how to work the blue check game.
Yeah, I haven't noticed that. I haven't reported on that, but no, I mean that is not surprising at all. That's the kind of scary thing about the online world, that you have a lot of anonymous folks that you don't know who they are, and they it is. The Soviets did this back in the 40s and the 50s. They were trying to exploit a lot of the tensions, divisions in the United States at the time. I mean, this is part of the communist playbook, so to speak. So it's not surprising at all that China is getting into the game and using these online platforms to propagate their message.
But with a sophistication that is simply unrivaled and a mass force, they can put 100 million people to work on this and just turn these things out. So back to the Swan interview very quickly. 60 Minutes needs new blood because it's dying on the vine. Did you see the cable news ratings last week? Did you see the collapse in cable?
I haven't. No, I haven't.
Oh, but it's just pretty bad. And I think it's because Americans are just bored. And so they're going to need some new faces who are younger, people like you and Swan and Sungmin Kim and people like that. Do you think the networks know that, Josh?
Well, yeah, you need to have interviewers that are fearless. I mean, who hold no partisan allegiance, who really are taking on both sides with tough questions. And Swan, I mean, Jonathan is one of the best interviewers out there. He has just a doggedness that shows through everything he does. So it was a great interview with the Pakistani prime minister. But that's the kind of those are the kind of traits that serve any journalist well.
Yes, yeah, and you can be a partisan. You just have to be fair, and that was a very fair interview. Josh, thank you, my friend. Hotline Josh, and all of you out there, have a great summer. I repeat, it is the first day of summer. Yes, it's Prime Day 1 and Prime Day 2 is tomorrow, but more importantly, summer has begun. Get out there and enjoy it to the fullest, right? Just make sure, having lost the summer, the rest of the world doesn't have summer because the virus rages and the Delta variant is spreading everywhere. But in the United States, we're blessed by having had Operation Warp Speed. So enjoy it and thank your stars and the good Lord for that. Enjoy summer. I'll be back tomorrow on the second day of summer to bring you all the news you need, the analysis you must have, right here on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Thank you, Adam and Dwayne. Thank you, Ben and Harley. Talk to you tomorrow. I'm Hugh Hewitt.